Good day folks, Sean here from Air Photography. So this is my beginner's guide for the new DJI Flip. If you've just purchased the Flip or you plan on purchasing it, this video is a great place to get started to learn about the hardware and the basic functionality and help you prepare for your very first flight. The DJI Flip is a very versatile drone. It can be flown completely autonomously. It can take off and land in the palm of your hand, all with the touch of a button. It can also be connected to a smartphone. That's going to give you more enhanced features, including virtual joysticks that allow you to fly it like a more traditional drone. On top of that, you can also connect it to a controller, something like the DJI RC-N3 or the DJI RC-2. That's going to give you a more traditional drone flight with better precision and longer range. When you purchase the DJI Flip, there's going to be a couple different ways in which it can be purchased, a couple different packages. You can buy a single combo that's going to come with a controller, the Flip drone, some spare props, a screwdriver for changing the props, a USB-C to USB-C data cable. This is also going to be used for charging. And we get a little information package. With the base kit, you can either get it with the DJI RC-2. This is the one with the built-in screen. Or you can get it with the RC-N3. With this controller, you will have to mount your smartphone. Both are equally good, so it all depends on personal preference. Now on top of that, you can get a Fly More combo, which essentially is the same thing. You're going to get a controller, the drone, but with this, you're going to get a few extra spare propellers. You're going to get 2 extra spare batteries, a charging hub. The charging hub will make it a little bit more convenient to charge multiple batteries. And on top of that, you're going to get a case. And if it is in your budget, I do highly recommend getting the Fly More kit. The case is nice, and it's really important to have some extra batteries. These batteries are rated for 31 minutes of flight time. Now, you're not going to get complete 31 minutes, but you're going to find a few extra batteries are going to be very beneficial. Now at this point, we're going to take a look around the equipment, both the controller and the drone. At the front here, we have our gimbal guard, and to remove it, we're just going to press on the sides and it will pull right off. When yours is brand new, it's also going to have a rubber housing over the camera. You don't really need to keep that on there, but for some people, you may want to hang on to it just to give the camera some extra protection. This is a folding drone, and I'll show you how to unfold it here in a minute. At the side here, we have a USB-C port. We can use that for connecting to things like computers for updating firmware, transferring content. But that's also how we can charge the battery while it's installed in the drone. And we'll take a look at charging here coming up in a minute. Right above that, we have our memory card slot. Beside that, we have a button. Now this button is only used when using the drone in autonomous mode. We use that for cycling through the different intelligent flight modes and for launching the drone from the palm of our hand. And we will be demonstrating that later on in the video. If we go to the other side here, we have our power button and we have some LED lights there beside it. Now the Flip is unique that it will automatically power on when we unfold it, which I will show you here in a second, but we'll continue around here. At the front, we have our gimbal. This is our camera. It's going to be stabilized while in flight. And we have a 3D infrared sensor there at the front. That's going to help detect obstacles to help prevent collisions in some scenarios. Now this drone doesn't have traditional obstacle avoidance like some other DJI drones, but that will definitely make it safer for flying in some scenarios. And also at the front there, which we can't see until we power it on, there are little lights there, little symbols that will appear signifying what mode it's in when we're using this autonomously without a controller. Now the way this drone unfolds is quite a bit different than other drones DJI has made in the past. Basically, we're going to fold out each arm. We'll start with the front. And you're going to notice as I fold out the back, the drone is going to automatically power on. That's going to make this drone, when using it autonomously without a controller, super fast, quick and easy to deploy. Now at any given time, we can use the power button there at the side to power it off or to power it on if it doesn't come on automatically. For example, I'm going to power it off here and it requires a double press, a short and then a long press. So we'll do a short press and then a long press. And the drone has gone ahead and powered off. And vice versa, we can use that same sequence to power it back on. A short press and then a long press. At the top here is where our battery is installed, and to remove it, we're just going to press down on the side buttons and it just pulls right out. So we're going to take a look at the different controllers that you will be able to purchase with the DJI Flip. We're going to start with the DJI RC-2. This is the one with the built-in screen. At the top, we have some fold-out antennas. You're going to notice that when you get it, there's going to be no control sticks installed. They're actually stored in the back there. And it's a good idea when you're traveling with it and you have this in a camera bag. It's a good practice to always remove those sticks just so you don't damage the gimbals. And they just screw on, and they're both identical, so it doesn't matter which side you put them on. At the front here, we have our power button. Just a quick press will show us how much power is in the controller. And we can power the controller on by doing a double press, just like we did with the drone. A quick press and then a long press. To power it off, it's the exact same thing. Quick press and then a long press. Now continuing along here, in the middle here we have our mode selector. We have Cine, we have normal, and we have sport mode. Normal is going to be for normal everyday flying. Sport mode is going to increase the speed, but the movements of the drone could be a little bit more jerky. And then we have Cine mode, which is going to give you more smoother cinematic movements. Over beside that, we have our pause button. If we're doing an intelligent flight mode, we can hit the pause button, that's going to stop it. And it's also our return to home button. So if we press and hold that, it's going to call the drone back. And we're going to demonstrate return to home later on in the video. At the bottom here, we have a USB-C port for charging, or we can also use that to update the firmware on the controller. And beside that, we have a memory card slot. Now it's not necessary to put a memory card into the controller. All the footage is going to be saved to the memory card on the drone. Basically, that's if you want to expand the storage of the controller, say you're doing screen recordings or different tasks like that, that's going to increase the storage capability. But for a lot of people, it's really not necessary. At the back here, we have two customizable buttons. We have C1 and C2. At the top here, we have two dials. This one here is going to dictate the tilt of the gimbal. So if you want to move the camera up or down. This one here is for digital zoom. That allow the camera to zoom in up to 3 times. Now it's going to be digital zoom, so the quality will be degraded a bit, but it will get you closer into the action. On this side, we have a record button. That's going to start and stop recording video. And over here, we have a shutter button for taking photos. That's the basic layout of the RC2. Now, if we take a look at the RC-N3, essentially it's the same, but with this one, we're going to mount a smartphone. Again, with this one, we have removable sticks, but with this one, they store at the bottom here. The button layout is very similar. Again, we have our power button. A quick press will show us how much power is in the controller, and we power it on the exact same way. A quick press and then a long press, just like we did with the RC2 and the drone. And again, to power it off, quick press and long press. Our mode selector is the same there on the front. And again, we have our pause button and our return to home button. Now the rest of the buttons are a little bit different. Over here, we have a function button. That's basically like the C1 and C2 button on the back of the controller, except we only have one here. This button off to the side here is how we switch back and forth between video and photo mode. If we take a look at the top here, we only have one dial. This one here again will adjust the angle of the camera. If you want to do digital zoom, you'll notice that there is no digital zoom dial on this side. If you want to do digital zoom, you will have to do it within the app. But we do have a shutter button. This will stop and start recording or take a photo depending what mode we're in. At the bottom, we have a USB-C port, again, for updating firmware or charging the controller. There is no memory card slot in this controller because if you're going to be doing screen recordings, it's going to be saved to the memory of your phone. At the top here, we have our antenna that we pull out, but this is also how we're going to mount our smartphone. And tucked away in behind there, if you can see that on camera, is the data cable. That's how we will connect it to our smartphone. So we're just going to pull it out here. And you can see right now I have a lightning connector connected to it because that's the type of phone I'm going to be using with this controller. But if you get a package with this controller, you're going to get both a lightning connector and a USB-C connector. And you would just swap out the cable depending on what type of phone you're using. Now to mount your phone, you're just going to make sure you have the data cable pulled out. And then we're just going to slide the phone in the top there, just like that. And then you would just go ahead and plug in the data cable. Now the benefit of using the DJI RC2 is that it does have the built-in screen. Everything you need to fly is already going to be pre-installed on the controller. If you're using the DJI RC-N3, you will have to download the DJI Fly App. So for some people, this is going to be a better option just because everything you know is going to work. You don't have to worry about downloading apps. You don't have to worry about whether your phone is compatible. If you do decide to go with the RC-N3, you would just go to the Apple App Store, search for DJI Fly, and you would download it. If you're using an Android device, you do have to go directly to the DJI website as it's not available in the Google Play Store. Now for the rest of this video demonstrating, I am going to be using the DJI RC2, but if you have the RC-N3, you can still follow along as the functionality of the app and the way everything works is identical. So we're going to talk about memory and charging now. When you purchase the DJI Flip, it's not going to come with a memory card. You will have to purchase one yourself, and you'll have to purchase a second one if you do want to add one to the controller. Myself, I like to use SanDisk. This is the Extreme Pro. This is a 128 gigabyte card, but you can put much larger ones in. That'll be up to the user, what size they put in there. 128 gigabytes for the most part works quite well. And when we go to install it, we're going to put the graphics side facing up. We'll just insert it and then press it in until we hear it click. And same with the one for the controller. This one here again is by SanDisk. Now this one is just the Extreme, again 128 gigabytes, and it just goes into the bottom with the graphics side facing up, and we just press it in until it clicks. Now the DJI Flip does come with a little bit of internal memory, but it's under 2 gigabytes, so it's not really going to give you a lot of storage. Purchasing a high capacity memory card is something you're going to want to do. Now when it comes to charging the controller and the drone, you're going to notice that we did get a charging cable, a USB-C to USB-C charging cable, but we did not get a charging brick. Now most likely you're going to have a charging brick that's already compatible. Most modern smartphones come with USB-C chargers or tablets. For the most part, any USB-C charger will be compatible and you can use it. If not, DJI does sell several compatible chargers on their website or on Amazon, and it doesn't have to be a DJI brand charger. For example, here's a charger. This is a 65 watt charger from Anker. If you have something like this or you need to purchase one like this will work as well. Now there's two different ways in which we can charge it depending on what package you purchase. The first way is by charging the battery right within the drone. You would just take the charging cable, plug it into the USB-C port. There's going to be some LED lights that are going to light up here signifying the charging status. Now if you purchase the Fly More combo, you're going to have this charging hub or charging dock, whatever you want to call it. And with it, you can install up to 4 batteries, 2 on one side and 2 on the other side. And you can use it when you have 1 battery installed, 2 batteries, 3 or 4. You don't have to have the thing full to use it. And it works exactly the same way. We would just take our charging cable, plug it into the side there. And again, we have some LED lights here that are going to signify the charging progress. These ones are already fully charged. They're just illuminated, but they will blink as it's charging. Now the unique thing with this charging hub is that it will charge 2 batteries at the exact same time. So we'll charge 2 batteries and then we'll go ahead and charge the other 2. The other interesting thing is that this charging hub can be used as a power bank. So if you have 1, 2, 3 or 4 batteries installed, you can plug other devices into it such as your smartphone if that's your priority to charge. And you can offload the power from these batteries into whatever device needs charged up. And to charge up your controller, you would use the same charging cable and just plug it into the USB-C at the bottom. And again, these LED lights will illuminate to signify the charging progress. So we've gone over the hardware, but before we can use the drone, fly it for the first time, we need to activate the equipment and we need to update the firmware. DJI releases firmware updates on a regular basis to fix problems and to add new features and functionality. Activating and updating the firmware is extremely easy. Basically, what we're going to do is power on both the controller and the drone. And again, to power on the drone, we just simply need to unfold it. We're going to power on the controller. When you purchase it brand new, they're just going to automatically connect, and it doesn't really matter in which order you power them on. Now, because your equipment's going to be brand new, the first time you power it on, there's going to be some setup that you need to do on the controller. It's going to ask you different things about your region. It's going to ask you to connect to Wi-Fi and a few other questions. So you just have to follow along. At some point, you will need to log in with your DJI account. If you don't have an account, it does give you the option to create one. Once you've logged in and everything is powered on and connected, it's going to prompt you to activate the drone. At that point, it will activate the drone and the controller. And right afterwards, it will inform you that there is some firmware that is available to update. So you just want to go ahead and update the firmware. So we've taken a look at the drone and the controllers and we've activated it. We've got the firmware updated. So we're going to go out and do a quick test flight. Now, before we do that, I want to go over the DJI Fly app. Now, as mentioned, when flying the Flip, there are 3 different ways in which we can fly it. We can fly it just by itself by using the buttons on the side, completely autonomously without the need of a controller, and we are going to demonstrate that when we go out for a test flight. The other way you can utilize it is by connecting the Flip to your smartphone. That's going to allow you to adjust the settings of the Flip when flying it autonomously, but it does allow you to fly it with some virtual joysticks. You can use your phone as a controller. And of course, the third way is by using a controller. So even if you're using something like the DJI RC-N3 that has the built-in screen, and the Fly app is already going to be pre-installed on it, you may still want to download the Fly app to your smartphone because it will be useful for transferring content and changing settings on the Flip if you're not using it in conjunction with a controller. So at this point, we are going to take a look at the Fly app, and we're going to look at it in 2 different ways. We're going to look at it when it's connected directly to the Flip on a smartphone, and then we're going to take a look at it when we're using it in conjunction with a controller, because the way it looks and behaves is quite a bit different. So we'll start with the smartphone connected to the Flip. So to connect your Flip to your smartphone, you basically just want to power on the Flip, either by unfolding it or manually turning it on by using the power button. And then you're just going to go ahead and launch the DJI Fly app. Now right away you can see here it does detect the flip, so we're going to hit the connect button. At some point it will ask you to connect to the Wi-Fi of the flip. You just go ahead and connect, and then you're going to come to this page here. This is the main page. Now if it's the first time that you've used it, you might get a tutorial first. So it's a good idea to go through that. It's going to give you some valuable information. At the bottom here we have three options. We have control, we have settings, and we have album. This first little area here is the album. We can click on that, and basically it's going to give us a preview of all the content stored on the Flip's memory card. It'll allow us to preview it, and we can download it to our smartphone. Again, the next area is the control section. This is where we can set what we want it to do. As you can see here, we can tap that and we can select the mode we want. Instead of using the button on the side to cycle through, we can do it all within the app. The other benefit of using it this way is it's going to give us a preview of what it's filming. So while it's flying autonomously, you can always check to make sure everything is lined up properly. But this is also how we control it manually. You can see if I select manual control, it gives us a takeoff button. Once it's in the air, it'll give us some virtual joysticks that we can fly it. And we will be demonstrating that once we go out for a test flight. Some other controls on this page is to switch back and forth between video and photo mode. We can start and stop recording, and we can enable and disable the microphone. One of the nice features of the Flip is while it's recording video, you can also embed audio into that video. It's going to use some noise reduction technology to get rid of the drone noise. Now the audio will be a little bit processed, so it's not going to be crystal clear audio, but good enough for social media and different applications like that. Now the other thing we can do from this page is give it some voice commands. The Flip is fully capable of voice commands for doing different tasks, and we would enable it by touching that box. You can see it's now listening for a command. We can click on check settings, and that's going to list all the different commands we can say to it. It gives us options for recording, for following, and for safety. Now we're not going to demonstrate voice commands in this video. I'm going to make a separate video going all over the voice command feature. And the last thing we can do here is go to our settings. From here we can adjust all the different flight parameters for the different intelligent flight modes. For example, if we hit follow, it's going to give us a preview of what follow does, but we can set if we want it to follow close, medium, or far. And the follow height, we can set it from low, flat, to high. And we can do that for every parameter. For example, under circle, it's going to give us some different options depending on what the task it's going to be doing. And when you set these parameters, it's going to be stored within the Flip's memory. So the next time you go to fly it, if you're not connecting it to the DJI Fly app, it's going to remember your last settings. And lastly, down here, we have some camera settings. We can set our resolution. We can set the frame rate. We can film in normal mode or D-Log-M if we want to do our own color grading. And we can also set the codec we wish to use. At the bottom here, it gives us some memory management. We can switch back and forth between the internal memory and the memory card, but that's also how we format the memory if we want to clear the memory card. And one thing I do want to point out here, with the Flip, we can actually film in a vertical format, but the maximum resolution is 2.7K, but that's going to have the content ready to be uploaded to social media in the proper aspect ratio. Also down here at the bottom, it says more settings. Here we can calibrate the IMU and the compass. If we get some errors and it's asking us to calibrate, we can change some control settings, and it gives us information about the drone and the current firmware. So now we're going to take a look at the Fly app when you're flying the Flip with something like a controller. And the Fly app is going to function the same way whether you're using it with the DJI RC2, the one with the built-in screen, or if you have a smartphone connected to the RC-N3. I'm just going to kind of go over some of the basic settings here so you know where everything is. We're going to start off at the side here. This first middle button is basically to do with our tracking and following, and we'll take a quick look at them while we're out in the field doing a test flight. It won't let me show you here while we're at a desk because it has to be up in the air. The next button here is our takeoff button. We can press and hold that, and that will launch the Flip. Now, when we're up in the air and we press that button, that also becomes a return to home and a landing button, which again, we will demonstrate when we're out doing a test flight. Below that, we have our maps. Now, when we have the Flip connected to GPS, this will pinpoint our exact location. It'll show us where the drone is, where the controller is. You can make it full screen by touching the map there. And again, to go back to the camera view, we just tap that box. Now we can also turn this into a compass by touching that button in the bottom right-hand corner. That's going to give us some information about the orientation of the drone and some other useful information. So whatever way you have it set, it's going to be personal preference. Usually myself, I leave it in that configuration there. Beside that, we have some important information about our telemetry, our distance, our height, the speed at which we're flying. the very bottom right hand side, you can see it says auto. So that means all the camera settings are currently in auto. And DJI drones do a really good job in auto. If you're a person who doesn't want to mess around with the camera settings, you can leave it in auto and it's going to do a fantastic job. But if you're a person who likes to adjust your own settings, we can put that into pro mode. That's going to allow us to update different information like the white balance, shutter speed, the ISO, and different aspects. We can just tap on that. And that's going to give us all the controls that we need to adjust the settings the way we like it. Beside that, that's how we can set our resolution and frame rate. Right now it's at 4K 30. You can adjust it to whatever you want to film in. And we can even film in vertical mode, just like we could do with the Fly app when connected just directly to a smartphone. It is only going to film at a resolution of 2.7K max. You can see it's going to do the crop for you. So when the video is done and saved to the memory card, it's already going to be in that vertical format. Moving over to the very right-hand side here in the middle, if we tap that button there, that's how we change the filming mode. You can see we can set it to photo, video. We can do master shots, quick shots, hyperlapses, and panoramas. Now in the demonstration when we go to Fly, I'm not going to demonstrate all that. I'm going to create separate videos for that, but it is very capable on the type of content you want to create. And beside that, we get some submenus. A lot of these different menus like video or photo will have different submenus. Right below that, we have our shutter button. That'll either start and stop a recording or take a photo or start in intelligent flight mode, depending what mode we're in. Below that is our album again. That'll take us to our album and show us a preview of everything that's currently stored on the memory card. We can preview it right on the controller. Over beside that, we have our focus button. Right now we're in automatic focus, but we can put that to manual focus. And we have our digital zoom button. As mentioned, if you're using the DJI RC2, we can use that dial on the right-hand side to adjust the zoom as well. Just keep in mind that is a digital zoom, so you will lose a bit of quality when zoomed in the 3 times. Moving around at the top here, these 3 dots are going to take us in deeper into the settings. Now, I'm not going to go through all these settings, but it's a good idea to go through and familiarize yourself to see what's in there. The most important one is the safety. Here you can set different parameters. We can set our return to home altitude, which we will talk a little bit about later on in this video. But you can also set your max altitude. You want to make sure you don't have it set higher than what's legal in the country in which you're flying. And you can also set your max distance. Right now I have mine set to no limit, but if you don't want to fly out farther than say 100 meters for your first couple flights, you can set that to 100 meters or 50 meters just while you're learning to use it. In that same area, that's how we do our calibrations if we get an error saying the drone needs to be calibrated. Moving along here, we have our satellite count. Right now I'm not connected to any because we're indoors, but once we're outdoors, that will connect to satellites anywhere from 20 up to 30. Beside that, we have our obstacle avoidance. Right now it's turned off because again, the drone is not in flight. So that'll tell you when the front obstacle avoidance is enabled. Beside that, we have our RC strength. It's going to tell you what the strength is, the connection between the controller and the drone. So it's definitely a good idea to keep an eye on that because if you get interference or there's obstacles in between the controller and the drone, that will get lower. And beside that, we have some battery information. We have a graphic there saying we have 75% left in the battery. And beside that, it says 0000. That's basically how much flight time we have left. And once we're up in the air, that'll adjust accordingly. When we're in flight, we can tap on the battery information there. It's going to give us some more information. It'll tell us how much longer before it's going to return to home. It's going to tell us how much until a forced landing and how much until the battery is completely depleted. Again, once we're up in the air, that will be adjusted. And up at the top here is kind of an important area. You can see right now it's saying aircraft pitch angle too large. That's because I have the drone folded and it's on its side. If there's any problems with the drone, usually they'll appear there. You'll get an error message. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on that. It'll tell you when everything is normal and ready to fly, or if something needs calibrated or there's an issue. And we can actually tap on that and it'll give us more information about the problem. And it's also a quick way to adjust some of our safety settings. So yeah, that's basically the Fly app. So we're going to head out now and do a quick test flight, and I'm going to show you some basic operations of the drone. So at this point, we're now going to do some demonstrations. I'm going to show you some basic functionality. As mentioned with the DJI Flip, there's 3 different ways in which you can fly it. You can fly it completely autonomously without a controller or a smartphone. You can connect it to your smartphone to get more settings, and you can use the smartphone as a virtual controller, and we can use a traditional controller. So I'm going to demonstrate all 3 methods. Now, if this is your first time using it, it's a good idea to pick a location without a lot of obstacles or people around. Where I'm flying right now might not be the best location for a person who's brand new and who has never flown a drone before. So just keep that in mind. Be very careful of your environment. It's also a good idea to go and make sure you've understood all the drone rules and regulations in your country. Every country is a little bit different, so you want to have a good understanding of them before you go for your first flight. So we're going to start out with autonomous mode. You can see I've got the Flip here. It's important to remember with autonomous mode and you don't have your smartphone connected, there's no way to change settings. You can change the mode in which it's going to film, but you can't set the distance or different attributes unless you've connected it to your smartphone. So if you don't plan on bringing a smartphone with you, you're just flying it completely autonomously, make sure you have all the settings that you want to film in before you go out. So to do your autonomous flight, you're basically just going to unfold the drone. It's automatically going to power on. Now the drone has to lock onto us before it can do the flight, so you want to make sure that you have the camera facing you, because if it doesn't detect a human subject, it won't be able to perform the task. At the side here, we have our mode selecting button, just on this side here. Just a quick press will cycle through the different modes.
Follow, droney, circle, rocket, spotlight.
So I'm just going to use spotlight for this demonstration. Once you have the proper mode set, you want to make sure your fingers are away from the propellers, and you just kind of want to grasp the drone through these openings here with your thumb there on the button. That way you can press it, because what we want to do is press and hold that button with our thumb there.
Spotlight. 3, 2, 1.
So as you can see there, the drone took off. It's now locked onto me, so if I move around, you can see that the drone is going to stay focused on me. And whatever mode you selected, if you did a circle, it would then rotate around you. If you did a droney, it would fly away and then come back to you. So you just wait for the task to be done. When you're ready to land the drone, you just simply go up to it and put your hand underneath it. And as you can see there, the drone is just going to come and land in the palm of your hand. So that's pretty simple. So the next thing what we can do here is connect it to a smartphone, and that's going to allow us to adjust some of the settings, and we can fly the drone manually. So the next way we can fly it is by connecting the DJI Flip to our smartphone. This is going to give us a couple benefits. It allows us to go in and adjust all the settings. We can actually initiate all the intelligent flight modes right from within the app, but we can also use it to fly manually. So I'm going to kind of demonstrate that here for you. First thing we can do is go over to settings. You can see it has all the intelligent flight modes listed there. For example, if we go to circle there, you can see we can set how far out we want it to fly before it circles us. We can set whether we want the drone low down to the ground or flat, which is basically just out in front of us. So we can adjust it exactly how we want it. We can also adjust our resolution and different parameters. If we go back over to control here, this is where we can select what intelligent flight mode we want to do. You can see we can select follow, droney, circle, rocket, spotlight, and direction track. And at the very top there, we can select manual control. That's how we would use the phone as a controller, which I'll demonstrate here in a minute. But first, I'll just show you how we can launch it. We're going to select spotlight. Again, I'm just going to launch it from the palm of my hand. So I'm just going to hit start here. Make sure the camera's aimed at you. So there we go there. You can see we were able to launch the intelligent flight mode directly from the smartphone. And we can actually click stop just to stop recording. Now that's not going to land the drone. We still have to go and put our hand underneath it. Just like that, and the drone will land. But let's go to manual control here for a minute. So from here, we can now use our smartphone as a controller. And we can use it in both vertical and horizontal, and I'll show you both here. So I'm going to press and hold takeoff. So the drone is taken off now, and you can see we have some virtual sticks there on the screen. Right now we're in a portrait format, and we can move the drone just like we would if we were using a real controller. We can rotate it. We can lower the altitude, raise the altitude. You know, and we can fly around and get some traditional drone footage. When flying in manual mode, you do have to manually hit record. You can see there. Unlike the autonomous modes, which will automatically start recording as soon as they go in and do it, but when in manual, you do have to manually hit that record. Now, the other thing we can do here, this button at the left-hand side, you can see we still have the virtual joysticks there at the bottom. but for some people it'll be a little bit easier to fly and you get a bigger preview of what you're filming. Now when you're ready to land, again, just put your hand underneath it and the drone is just going to go ahead and land. So now at this point I'm going to demonstrate how to fly with a controller. Now flying with a controller is going to offer some benefits. It's going to give you more precision because we have the sticks on there. It's also going to give you a better signal and better range. When you're flying with a smartphone, you're using just basic Wi-Fi, so you're going to be limited to like 75 meters, 100 meters before the signal will start to break up. And when you're flying with a controller here, it has the 04 transmission system. So it's rated for 13 kilometers. Now you're never going to fly out 13 kilometers, but it's just going to give you an overall better connection and overall better flight experience. Now the way we take off is a little bit different. You can take off from the palm of your hand, or you can set the drone down on a drone pad or a hard surface. And we have a takeoff button built right into the screen there. So I'm going to clumsily try to show you that here, doing everything one-handed. We press the takeoff button, you can see a pop-up box comes in the middle of the screen. And then what we want to do is press and hold on that.
Home point updated.
And you can see that the drone just went ahead and took off. Now a couple things you want to do before you take off is you want to make sure that you have a good connection to satellites, and you can check that by the very right hand side of the screen at the top there. You can see currently I'm connected to 22, 23, 24, kind of bounces around a little bit, but you want to have a good connection. You should wait till you at least have 14 satellites, usually I recommend, because once you're connected to satellites it's going to set a home point. And we'll check our map there. You can see there's now a yellow H. That means a home point has been set, and that's really important because if the drone gets disconnected, you want to make sure it knows where to come back. Also the GPS, the satellites will hold the drone in position on a windy day. If you don't have satellite connection, the drone could drift around and the wind could actually take it away. Now, so at this point, you just kind of want to train yourself, get comfortable on the sticks, figure out what they do. I'll just show you briefly. This right stick, if we press forward, the drone is going to move forward. If we pull back, the drone is going to come back to us. If we push from side to side, the drone is going to move accordingly. If we push left, the drone is going to move left. If we push right, the drone is going to move right. If we press up, that's going to raise the altitude. If we pull down, that's going to lower the altitude. And with it, if we push from side to side, that's going to rotate the drone, as you can see there. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when you're using the right stick and you're moving from side to side, it's going to depend on the orientation of the drone. For example, if I spin the drone so it's now facing us, so now when I push right on the stick, the drone is actually going to move to the left. So that can kind of be confusing when you're a new pilot. So it is something to pay attention to. And as you get good and comfortable on the sticks, you can use a series of movements to get some really dynamic movements, rotations, other than just linear flying. But that's something that will come with time and practice. So we're going to go for a bit of a flight here. I'm just going to move the drone forward. And I'm going to raise the altitude. Make sure I'm cleared from all the trees. And we're just going to send the drone out a little bit because I'm going to demonstrate the return to home. And this is where earlier on I mentioned the return to home altitude. If you get disconnected for whatever reason, or you manually initiate a return to home, the drone is going to raise to that altitude before it comes back. So that's one thing you don't have to worry about as a new pilot if you're worried about being disconnected or if you fly out too far. In the event of a fail-safe, you've been disconnected or something happens to the signal, the drone is just going to automatically come back to where it took off from. The other way a return to home will initiate is if the battery gets too low. If we take a look at our battery information, you can see it says it has 7 minutes until it returns to home automatically, 9 minutes or almost 10 minutes before a forced landing. So the drone will constantly calculate how much power it needs to get home, depending on the distance and how far away you are. When the battery gets down to a certain level, the drone is going to automatically return to home. Now you can cancel that, but it's not really a good idea, especially as a new pilot. Just let the drone come home if it's telling you it needs to come back. The other way to do a return to home is a manual return to home, and that's great if you happen to lose your orientation, perhaps you don't know where the drone is. You can just hit return to home, and the drone's again going to come back to where it took off from. So I'm just going to fly out a little bit more here. And there's two different ways in which we can do a return to home. We can press the return to home button on the controller, press and hold that, and the drone will start to come home. Or we can use the takeoff button. If we tap on that, you can see it's become a return to home and a land button. If we hit land, it's just going to land right in spot, which obviously we don't want out over the field there. So I'm just going to demonstrate that here for you. I'm going to hit return to home.
Return to home.
You can see the drone is going to go up to the predetermined height, which is showing by that line on the screen there. And then it's going to come back to where it took off from. Now I will have to cancel it before it gets too close to me because I am standing under a tree right now, so we don't want it to fly into a tree. But that is something really important to keep in mind. These do have some sensors on them, but it's always a good idea to pay attention to your surroundings. It's not a good idea to take off from under structures like trees or different buildings. And at any time, if you think it's going to hit something or you're not liking what it's doing, you can hit the cancel button there on the screen and it will stop the return to home. So you can see it's coming back to us now. It's giving us a warning there that there's strong wind. And you can see now we've got the virtual home point there, and it's going to come down and attempt to land. But as mentioned, I will cancel it here in a minute once it gets a little bit closer, and I'll bring it in manually the rest of the way. And there we go there, the drone is out in front of us. So pretty simple. It's just a matter of getting on the sticks, practicing. These drones are very easy to fly and very safe. They've got a lot of built-in safety features, and that's going to make it a little bit more comfortable to fly, especially as a new pilot. Now when it comes to landing, we can land in a couple different ways. Again, we can hit that button on the side and we can just press and hold on the land button, or just like before when flying it autonomously,
Landing.
we can just put our hand underneath it and the drone will come in and land. So yeah folks, that is my beginner's guide for the DJI Flip. If this is a drone you're interested in, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, as I will be covering it fully over the coming weeks and months. I have many tutorials planned. We're going to dive in deeper to some of the specific features of it. This was more of a general guide, but if you want to know how to do some very specific things, some of the features, make sure you stay tuned for them. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it and found it had value. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.